Imagine a civilization so advanced, its influence echoes through time, shaping the cultures that followed for centuries. Welcome to the Olmec civilization, a world where colossal stone heads still stand as silent guardians of a lost empire. But who were these enigmatic people? What secrets do their monuments and rituals hold? Stick around as we uncover the mysteries of the Olmecs, Mesoamerica's first great civilization.
You're about to dive into the untold story of the Olmec civilization. But before we go any further, let me ask you, why are you still watching without hitting that like button? Don't let the history of these incredible people slip past you. Hit like and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. It's your chance to be part of this journey. Don't miss out.
The Olmec civilization, which spanned from approximately 1200 BCE to 400 BCE, is widely regarded as the bedrock of Mesoamerican culture. Although some scholars debate the label of mother culture, the influence of the Olmecs on subsequent civilizations, like the Maya, Zapotecs, and Aztecs, is undeniable. They laid the groundwork for key elements of Mesoamerican society, from religious iconography to monumental architecture, and their innovations rippled across centuries, shaping the region's cultural landscape. Nestled in the tropical lowlands of modern Veracruz and Tabasco, Mexico, the Olmec heartland was a landscape teeming with life and resources. The rivers that meandered through these lush, fertile plains not only provided water for agriculture, but also served as vital trade routes. The region's volcanic soils, enriched by the annual flooding, offered the perfect foundation for farming, enabling the Olmecs to cultivate crops like maize, beans, and squash. But it wasn't just the soil that sustained them. The Olmecs had a unique relationship with their environment, one that blended practicality with profound spirituality. In these vibrant, water-soaked plains, the Olmecs built a civilization that was deeply tied to both the physical and supernatural worlds. The very land they inhabited shaped their identity, from their agricultural practices to their religious beliefs. They observed the stars and cosmic patterns, using them to time agricultural cycles and direct their ritual practices. The natural environment itself became sacred, intertwined with their understanding of life, death, and rebirth. This symbiosis between Earth and the cosmos would be reflected in their monumental creations.
The Olmec people were not just farmers or traders, they were visionary artisans. They are best known for their colossal stone heads, which represent the power and mystery of the civilization. These massive sculptures, some weighing over 40 tons, stand as silent witnesses to a time when rulers and priests wielded power not only through political authority, but through a profound connection to the divine. These heads were not just works of art, they were embodiments of Olmec spirituality and political ideology. Jade, rubber, and basalt were just a few of the materials that the Olmecs prized. The term Olmec itself, derived from the Nahuatl word for rubber, speaks to their mastery of creating rubber products, a unique technological achievement at the time. They used this rubber for ceremonial ball games and trade goods, adding to their extensive exchange networks that spanned across Mesoamerica. Their jade, a symbol of wealth and power, traveled far beyond their homeland, carried by merchants who served as cultural ambassadors, spreading Olmec art, religious symbols, and knowledge. Despite the grandeur of their monumental architecture and the widespread influence of their trade, it was the Olmecs' deep connection to their land that truly defined their civilization. The sacred rituals they performed in the temples and ceremonial centers, their reverence for the jaguar, a creature symbolizing power and mystery, and their calendar systems all point to a people who saw the earth as more than just a place to live. It was a living, breathing force, intertwined with the divine and the cosmic.
As we journey through the story of the Olmecs, we will uncover not only their groundbreaking achievements in art and architecture, but also the profound ways in which their relationship with the environment shaped the culture that left its indelible mark on Mesoamerica. The Olmec legacy, though mysterious in many ways, continues to echo through the ages, providing a foundation upon which later civilizations would build their own monumental histories. The environment of the Olmec civilization was not just a backdrop to their rise. It was an integral force that shaped every aspect of their culture, from agriculture to art to religion. The Olmecs thrived in the lush tropical lowlands of Veracruz and Tabasco, Mexico, an area where the land seems to pulse with vitality. The rivers that snaked through the region, like the Coatzacoalcos and Tonala, were not only sources of water, but the highways of the Olmec world. These rivers brought life to the fertile floodplains which the Olmecs called home. Here, the soil was rich with volcanic ash, creating an environment where crops grew in abundance, feeding a society that was both agriculturally sophisticated and highly organized.
The regular flooding of these rivers deposited nutrient-rich silt, replenishing the soil and allowing the Olmecs to harvest bountiful crops of maize, beans, squash, and other staples. However, the relationship between the Olmecs and their environment was not just practical, it was spiritual. For the Olmecs, nature wasn't just something to be used, but something to be revered. The rivers, the rains, and the fertile earth were seen as gifts from the gods, with the land itself imbued with spiritual significance. This sacred connection to the environment can be seen in their religious practices and monumental art, where the natural world and the divine were intertwined. Rivers, acting as natural highways, facilitated not just trade, but the spread of Olmec influence. Canoes powered by human hands glided down these waterways, connecting Olmec cities like San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes. These rivers weren't just practical routes, they were symbolic lifebloods, carrying both goods and culture across vast distances. Goods such as jade, obsidian, rubber, and basalt flowed along these rivers, helping the Olmecs create a vast network of trade that extended deep into Mesoamerica. By using these waterways, the Olmecs established connections with distant peoples, exchanging not just physical resources, but also knowledge, beliefs, and artistic styles. The jade that the Olmecs prized so highly came from distant mountains, particularly the Motagua Valley and Guatemala. It wasn't just a commodity, it was a sacred material, symbolizing life, fertility, and the supernatural. The Olmecs carved jade into intricately detailed figurines, ceremonial axes, and masks. These objects weren't merely decorative, they served as bridges between the physical and the divine, used in rituals that connected the living with the gods. Jade was as much a spiritual resource as it was an economic one, and its significance reverberated throughout Mesoamerica for centuries.
Then there's basalt, the heavy stone that the Olmecs used to create their monumental sculptures, including the famous colossal heads. These heads, weighing up to 40 tons each, are a testament to the Olmecs' mastery of both engineering and art. These giant stone faces, likely representing Olmec rulers, were more than just artistic expressions. They were symbols of power, permanence, and divine authority. Carved from volcanic rock, the heads seem to rise out of the earth itself, as though they are part of the very land that nourished the Olmecs. The obsidian of the region, sharp, smooth, and deadly, was another key resource that defined Olmec culture. Obsidian tools, used for both everyday tasks and ritual purposes, were prized for their razor-sharp edges. These tools, such as knives and scrapers, were far more effective than those made from stone or bone, giving the Olmecs a technological edge over other Mesoamerican societies.
The use of obsidian also ties into the Olmec's spiritual belief in transformation. The cutting edge symbolized the transition between life and death, the earthly and the supernatural. Perhaps the most iconic of all Olmec resources, however, was rubber. The Olmecs were the first Mesoamerican civilization to extract latex from rubber trees, a process that involved harvesting sap from the trees, processing it, and then using it to create goods like rubber balls for the ceremonial ball game. This rubber, which bounced higher than any known material, held deep cultural significance. The ball game was not just a sport, it was a ritual, a symbolic contest between life and death, played by elites in ceremonial centers, and rubber was the medium through which the game came to life.
These resources, the jade, basalt, obsidian, and rubber, were not just commodities, they were keys to understanding the Olmec worldview. They were symbols of power, spirituality, and cosmic connection. The Olmec's ability to harness the natural wealth around them allowed them to build a civilization that wasn't just surviving, but thriving. The land provided the material wealth, but it was the Olmec's reverence for the land and its spiritual significance that gave them the cultural and religious strength to leave a lasting legacy in Mesoamerica. In the end, the Olmec's connection to their environment was not just about resources, it was about creating a culture that viewed the land as a living, breathing entity, sacred and powerful. This deep connection to the earth would influence the civilizations that came after them, from the Maya to the Aztecs, ensuring that the Olmec's legacy was woven into the very fabric of Mesoamerican culture for centuries to come. The heart of the Olmec civilization was not just a place, it was a series of interconnected settlements that would define Mesoamerican culture for centuries. From the early days at San Lorenzo to the heights of La Venta and the later resurgence at Tres Zapotes, each center embodied a unique phase of Olmec civilization and left an indelible mark on the region's political, spiritual, and artistic legacy.
San Lorenzo, located in the fertile lowlands of Veracruz, was the birthplace of Olmec civilization. Between 1200 and 900 BCE, it served as the Olmec's primary political and ceremonial center, its layout and monumental architecture reflecting the civilization's sophistication. The city was strategically placed along the Coatzacoalcos River, a vital waterway that connected the Olmecs to other Mesoamerican cultures. What set San Lorenzo apart were its colossal stone heads, massive basalt sculptures that stood as powerful symbols of Olmec authority. These heads, weighing up to 40 tons, are among the most iconic relics of ancient Mesoamerica. Carved from volcanic basalt and transported over great distances, these sculptures were not only a testament to Olmec artistry, but to their capacity for engineering and social organization. Their purpose, likely tied to royal symbolism or ancestral veneration, shows how Olmec rulers sought to project divine authority. In addition to the monumental heads, San Lorenzo also featured an elaborate network of mounds, plazas, and drainage systems, early examples of urban planning that helped the Olmecs manage their complex society. However, by around 900 BCE, San Lorenzo began to decline. Some theories point to environmental stress, including flooding and soil depletion, as the cause of its collapse. As the city faded, its cultural influence did not. It laid the foundation for what would come next.
After the decline of San Lorenzo, La Venta rose to prominence, becoming the primary Olmec center between 900 and 400 BCE. Located in Tabasco, near the Rio Tonalá, La Venta was situated strategically to benefit from the region's natural resources and trade routes. As the Olmec's cultural and ceremonial heart, La Venta showcased the civilization at its peak, an era defined by grandeur, spiritual power, and artistic achievement. La Venta's ceremonial complex, complete with a great pyramid,
basalt altars, and vast plazas, exemplifies the Olmec's architectural prowess. The Great Pyramid, constructed with earth and stone, is thought to have been a place of religious significance, possibly linked to the Olmec's cosmological beliefs. The pyramid's alignment with celestial events suggests an advanced understanding of astronomy, a trait that would be passed on to later Mesoamerican cultures like the Maya. At La Venta, the Olmecs honed their artistry to new heights. The colossal heads, some of which were moved here from San Lorenzo, are joined by other monumental sculptures, including altars and stelae that depict rulers and divine figures. These works of art were not just ceremonial, they were political statements, visually reinforcing the divine right of Olmec rulers. However, despite its achievements, La Venta also began to decline by around 400 BCE. While environmental factors like deforestation and erosion may have played a role, political and economic changes, such as shifts in trade routes or internal conflicts, could have also contributed to its fall.
While San Lorenzo and La Venta were the primary centers of Olmec civilization, Tres Zapotes represents the persistence of Olmec culture into its later years. Located in the southern part of Veracruz, Tres Zapotes became one of the last Olmec settlements to remain influential after the decline of La Venta. By 400 BCE, Tres Zapotes rose as a center of Olmec life, though it was in competition with emerging powers like the Maya and Zapotecs. Tres Zapotes is best known for its colossal head, which stands as a direct continuation of the monumental sculpture tradition that began at San Lorenzo. The presence of Olmec-style art at Tres Zapotes, as well as evidence of trade with other Mesoamerican regions, suggests that despite the broader decline of Olmec political power, their cultural influence endured. The city also marks a transitional period in Olmec history, as it absorbed influences from surrounding regions, particularly in terms of trade and religious practices. Despite this, by around 300 BCE, Tres Zapotes had begun to lose its former glory, overtaken by new political entities. However, its role in preserving Olmec traditions ensured that the cultural DNA of the Olmecs would continue to shape the Mesoamerican world for centuries.
The settlements of San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes were not merely centers of power. They were the living embodiments of Olmec society's greatest achievements. Each settlement served as a beacon of the Olmec's cultural, spiritual, and political innovations. From the monumental heads to the sophisticated urban planning and artistic mastery, these settlements defined the Olmec legacy, which endured long after their political power faded. The Olmec civilization may have disappeared as a political force, but their influence reverberated through the art, religion, and governance of later Mesoamerican cultures, proving that their foundational role in the development of the region's civilizations could never be erased.
The Olmec civilization, often regarded as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, was a society that blended political authority, religious power, and economic control into a single, tightly knit framework. At the center of this system stood the divine kings, rulers whose authority extended beyond the political realm and into the spiritual. These kings were not only the heads of state, they were seen as the earthly intermediaries between humans and the gods, responsible for maintaining cosmic balance through sacred rituals, the prosperity of agriculture, and the flow of trade. The Olmec rulers' political power was intrinsically linked to their religious status. They were seen as divinely appointed, with their authority stemming not only from their lineage, but from their perceived ability to communicate directly with the divine. Their role in society wasn't simply to govern, but to mediate between the gods and the people. This connection to the divine was central to their power. Rulers were expected to lead rituals, ensure favorable weather, and perform ceremonies to maintain the agricultural cycles that were so vital to their people's survival. In this theocratic system, rituals and ceremonies played a central role. The rulers, alongside their priests, performed elaborate ceremonies that were believed to maintain order in the universe, guaranteeing prosperity and the protection of the people. These rituals often involve the use of sacred objects, such as jade, obsidian, and rubber, materials that were not only valuable, but believed to hold mystical powers that could influence the forces of nature.
In this tightly controlled system, the priests held immense power. They were the intellectual and spiritual guides of Olmec society, responsible for maintaining the calendar, interpreting celestial events, and advising the kings on when to hold important rituals. Their knowledge of the stars and seasons directly impacted agricultural practices. Priests guided planting and harvest cycles, ensuring that crops would flourish and the gods would favor their land. Priests played a crucial role in maintaining the divine status of the kings. The success of the ruler's reign was often tied to the success of the rituals and the ability to keep the gods appeased. This dynamic created a symbiotic relationship between the kings and the priestly class. The elaborate temples, altars, and sacred spaces found at Olmec centers like La Venta and San Lorenzo were likely dedicated to both political and spiritual purposes, underscoring the central role of religion in Olmec governance. While the kings and priests occupied the upper echelons of Olmec society, the backbone of the civilization was formed by the artisans and farmers. These classes, though not as publicly visible, were integral to the functioning of the Olmec world. The artisans, skilled in working with jade, basalt, and other materials, created the extraordinary works of art that have come to define Olmec culture, from the colossal heads to the smaller figurines used in religious ceremonies.
Olmec artisans were not only important for their craftsmanship, but also for their ability to encode political and spiritual power into their works. The colossal heads, for example, are not just works of art, they are symbols of the divine king's power, meant to project authority across the land. These sculptures were often placed in strategic locations, such as plazas or ceremonial centers, where they could be seen by all, serving as constant reminders of the divine connection between the king and the gods. Meanwhile, farmers worked the fertile lands provided by the Coatzacoalcos River and other nearby water sources, cultivating essential crops such as maize, beans, and squash. These crops formed the foundation of Olmec sustenance and trade. Though farmers were lower in the social hierarchy, their role was vital for the survival and economic success of the civilization. Their labor, alongside the artisans' skilled work, allowed the Olmec economy to flourish. Trade was a vital element of Olmec political and economic life. The kings controlled the trade routes, ensuring that the most valuable goods, jade, obsidian, and rubber, flowed into Olmec centers and were distributed throughout the region. The rubber harvested from trees in the lowlands was used for ceremonial ball games and other goods, while jade and obsidian were highly prized for both artistic and ritual purposes.
The Olmecs established trade routes that connected their civilization to distant cultures, including the Maya, Zapotec, and even distant regions of Central America. The economic and cultural exchanges facilitated by these routes helped spread Olmec influence across Mesoamerica. This trade network was not just about goods, it was also about the exchange of ideas, art, and religious practices, reinforcing the Olmec status as a civilization that shaped the development of Mesoamerican culture. For the Olmec civilization, religion was not merely a system of belief. It was a lens through which they viewed the cosmos, governed their society, and expressed their power. Every facet of their culture, from their monumental art to the layout of their cities, reflected their deep spiritual connection to the world around them. Central to this worldview were the ceremonial centers, which served as both physical and metaphysical hubs of power, and the sacred caves, believed to be portals connecting the earthly and divine realms. The Olmecs constructed massive ceremonial centers, with earthen pyramids and ritual platforms at their cores, which served as both political and spiritual heartlands. These sites, like San Lorenzo and La Venta, were not simply places for public gatherings. They were symbolic of the Olmecs' deep belief in the interconnection of the divine and earthly realms. For the Olmecs, the ceremonial centers were the axis mundi, or the world's center, where the divine order was maintained through rituals, sacrifices, and offerings to the gods. The earthen pyramids and ritual platforms were designed with both architectural grandeur and celestial alignment in mind. The Great Pyramid at La Venta, for example, served not only as a monument to the Olmec rulers, but also as a powerful symbol of their connection to the heavens. These pyramids were designed to reflect the Olmec's understanding of the world, with each step and layer of the structure symbolizing different levels of existence, from the earthly realm to the celestial heights.
The ritual platforms were likely the sites of key ceremonies, where rulers and priests conducted rituals to maintain harmony with the gods. These rituals, which might have involved sacrifices, offerings of jade, obsidian, and other precious items, were believed to ensure the fertility of the land and the favor of the gods. These acts were essential in legitimizing the power of the rulers, who were seen not just as political figures, but as divine representatives on earth. The sacred caves in Olmec religious thought were among the most important metaphysical spaces. For the Olmecs, caves represented portals to the underworld, through which they could communicate with ancestors and gods. These caves were seen as living spaces, imbued with spiritual power, where the boundaries between the physical and divine worlds were permeable. In Olmec mythology, these sacred places were not just sites of worship, they were the origins of life, places where the jaguar gods and other powerful deities dwelled, guarding the balance of the universe. In Olmec art, the jaguar was a dominant symbol representing power, mystery, and transformation. The jaguar's ability to move between the earth and the underworld made it a natural symbol of the sacred caves, which were believed to be conduits to both the spirit world and the earthly realm. The jaguar's ferocity and stealth represented the ability to navigate the liminal spaces between life and death, light and dark. This symbolic role of the jaguar is evident in the jaguar-headed figurines and masks often found in Olmec ceremonial sites. These pieces not only reflected the importance of the jaguar in Olmec cosmology, but also underscored the belief in transformation and rebirth, a concept deeply tied to the sacred caves.
In Olmec religion, the cosmos was seen as an interconnected web of realms, with each realm, earth, underworld, and heavens, influencing the others. The idea of portals, such as caves and ceremonial spaces, is integral to understanding Olmec spirituality. These spaces were believed to connect these realms, allowing for communication and transformation. The Olmec ball game, for example, was not merely a sport. It was a ritualized act, symbolizing the struggle between life and death, where the outcomes of the game might influence the balance between these realms. The cyclical nature of the Olmec worldview, where life, death, and rebirth were seen as ongoing processes, is reflected in the rituals performed at these sacred sites. Sacrifices, whether human, animal, or material, were believed to ensure that this cycle remained in harmony. The Olmec's monumental art, particularly the colossal heads, also reflects this belief in transformation. These heads, which often depict rulers, are not only symbolic representations of divine kingship, but also reminders of the ruler's role in bridging the earthly and spiritual worlds. The Olmec's religious beliefs were vividly expressed in their art, which played a crucial role in reinforcing their spiritual worldview. Jade, obsidian, and rubber were not just materials for tools, they were sacred substances that held spiritual power. Jade, in particular, was associated with life, fertility, and the gods, and was often used to craft figurines, masks, and ceremonial axes. These works of art were meant to channel spiritual energy and connect the physical world to the divine.
The colossal heads, though primarily representations of Olmec rulers, also embodied spiritual power. Carved from massive blocks of basalt, they were more than political symbols. They were divine representations of the ruler's connection to the gods. Their placement in ceremonial centers was intentional, meant to be seen by all who gathered, serving as reminders of the divine authority the rulers wielded. The Olmec's religious practices and worldview laid the groundwork for many of the spiritual beliefs that would flourish in later Mesoamerican cultures. The Maya, for instance, adopted the Olmec concept of sacred space in their own cities, creating ceremonial centers aligned with the cosmos. Similarly, the jaguar and other animals associated with the underworld continued to feature prominently in Maya and Aztec iconography. The Olmec's reverence for sacred caves and their understanding of cosmic cycles also influenced later civilizations, who integrated these elements into their own rituals and ceremonies. The Olmec civilization's artistic achievements stand as monumental testaments to their religious, political, and cultural ideologies. Through massive sculptures, intricate jade carvings, and ritualistic figurines, the Olmecs created art that was not merely decorative, it was deeply tied to their worldview, serving as both symbols of power and vehicles for divine interaction. These works helped define Olmec identity and laid the foundations for Mesoamerican artistic traditions that would influence civilizations for centuries. Among the most recognizable of Olmec artistic achievements are the colossal stone heads, which represent the divine kingship at the heart of Olmec society. Carved from massive blocks of basalt, some weighing as much as 40 tons, these heads stand as monumental symbols of the ruler's authority and divine connection. These monumental works of art were more than just depictions of kings. They embodied the idea that these rulers were not merely earthly leaders, but divine figures with cosmic significance. The heads were strategically placed in ceremonial centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta, emphasizing the central role of these sites in maintaining both political and spiritual order. These statues were likely representations of individual rulers, each unique in facial features and expression, which reinforced the idea that the kings themselves were the living embodiments of divine power. Their large, often fierce expressions convey strength, while the helmets and other symbolic features indicate their military and ceremonial roles. These monumental sculptures also represent the interplay between politics and religion in Olmec society. Each head not only glorified the king, but served as a conduit to the divine, helping to legitimize the ruler's authority in the eyes of the people. The creation and transportation of these heads were feats of engineering, requiring a coordinated labor force capable of moving the giant stone blocks from distant quarries to ceremonial centers. This immense effort underscores the social structure and organization of the Olmec, with the elite controlling both the production of monumental art and the labor needed to bring it into existence. Jade, a material highly valued for its spiritual properties and striking beauty, played a central role in Olmec art and ritual. Unlike the colossal heads, which conveyed power through their size and public display, jade figurines and ceremonial axes were more intimate yet equally powerful symbols. These items were not just artistic creations, but objects imbued with divine significance. Jade figurines,
often depicting gods, ancestors, or shamans, were likely used in religious rituals to establish a connection with the divine. The material itself, revered for its green color and durable nature, was believed to symbolize life, fertility, and supernatural power. The Olmecs carved jade into small portable objects that could be used during ceremonies or buried as offerings to the gods. These figurines were also used to represent deities or ancestral spirits, reinforcing the idea that the spiritual world was directly linked to the physical world. Their presence in Olmec society suggests a belief in divine intervention in daily life, with the figurines serving as conduits for divine energy. The ceremonial axes crafted from jade were similarly symbolic. Though they were not meant for practical use, these axes were often associated with power, warfare, and the divine right of kings. They were sometimes carved in the form of jaguar heads, another powerful symbol of Olmec spirituality. The jaguar, which was closely tied to the underworld and considered a powerful figure in Olmec cosmology, symbolized strength and transformation. The axes thus represented a dual connection to both the earthly power of the king and the spiritual power of the gods.
Among the most enigmatic forms of Olmec art are the baby-face figurines, which feature exaggerated infantile features such as large eyes and small mouths. These figures, typically made of jade or ceramic, have been interpreted in various ways, but they consistently appear as symbols of transformation. The large, innocent eyes suggest a link to the divine, while the small mouths imply a childlike purity or a connection to the spirit world. These figures may represent shamanic figures or transformed beings, individuals who have passed between the physical world and the divine realm, embodying the Olmec belief in the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. In Olmec cosmology, the underworld was a place of both death and regeneration, and these figures may have symbolized rebirth or the spiritual transformation that accompanied contact with the divine. Alternatively, they might represent the infantile stage of a god's life, signifying a return to a time of purity and potential before divine action or transformation. The Olmec's artistic works were inherently political. The colossal heads, as representations of divine kings, reinforced the ruler's authority, reminding the people of the ruler's sacred role. These heads were likely positioned at ceremonial sites where the populace could engage in rituals that validated the ruler's power. Similarly, the jade figurines and ceremonial axes were objects of both artistic beauty and political significance, emphasizing the Olmec's deep connection between religion and governance. Olmec art was also deeply symbolic, reflecting the culture's belief in the interconnection between the spiritual and physical realms. The material choices, such as jade for its spiritual symbolism and basalt for its enduring strength, reinforced the sacred nature of the art. Art was not simply an expression of beauty, but a means of controlling power, maintaining cosmic balance, and connecting the human world to the divine.
The Olmec legacy can be seen in the art of later Mesoamerican civilizations, especially in the Maya and Aztec cultures. The Maya adopted Olmec iconography, such as the jaguar, and created similar monumental art and ceremonial centers. The practice of creating monumental sculpture and the use of sacred materials like jade continued in these later civilizations. The Olmec ball game, which was often depicted in Olmec art, also became a key ritual in later Mesoamerican societies. While the Olmec civilization itself may have declined by 400 BCE, their artistic traditions lived on, influencing cultures across Mesoamerica for centuries. Their work in basalt, jade, and other materials established a visual and spiritual language that would persist throughout the ancient Americas.
Now, I know you've been enjoying the story of the Olmec civilization so far, but think about it. If you're learning all this fascinating history, why not share it with others? There are so many people out there who are missing out on these amazing details, and you could be the one to change that. Go ahead and hit that like button if you found this interesting, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Let's spread the knowledge together, because the Olmec story deserves to be heard.
The Olmec civilization, often regarded as the first major Mesoamerican culture, was not only a center of artistic and architectural innovation, but also a pioneer in intellectual fields that would shape the region for centuries to come. Their advances in writing, astronomy, and mathematics laid the groundwork for the civilizations that followed, particularly the Maya. Through their early writing systems, detailed astronomical observations, and the possible use of zero, the Olmecs made critical contributions to Mesoamerican intellectual history. Though the Olmecs did not develop a fully formed writing system like the Maya, they were crucial in the early development of writing in Mesoamerica. Olmec writing was primarily symbolic and consisted of pictographs and glyphs used for ritualistic purposes and communication. Evidence of early writing can be found on monumental stones and altars at key Olmec centers such as San Lorenzo and La Venta, where symbols were carved into stone to convey significant political or religious messages. These early writing symbols represent some of the earliest known forms of writing in Mesoamerica, which would later evolve into the more sophisticated scripts of the Maya and Zapotec. Though the Olmec writing system is still under investigation, it is clear that they were using symbols to represent ideas, people, and possibly even events, marking a crucial step toward the more complex systems of written language that would characterize the region. The use of glyphs to record important ceremonies, dynastic histories, or celestial observations highlights the Olmec's understanding of language as a tool for governance and religion, and it foreshadows the rise of full-fledged writing systems across the region.
The Olmecs were keen observers of the night sky, and their astronomical knowledge was fundamental to their calendar system and religious practices. While the Olmecs did not have a fully developed calendar, like the Maya, their early timekeeping systems were based on precise observations of celestial bodies, including the sun, moon, and particularly the planet Venus, which held great significance in Olmec religion. The Olmecs likely created ritual calendars tied to the lunar and solar cycles, helping to guide the agricultural practices essential to their society. By tracking the movements of Venus, which played a central role in Mesoamerican cosmology, they could align their religious ceremonies with the natural rhythms of the universe. The Olmec calendar was integral to agricultural cycles, ensuring the planting and harvesting of crops like maize were done at the most opportune times. This practice of timekeeping through celestial observation would go on to influence the Maya, who later refined it into their highly sophisticated long-count calendar. Additionally, the alignment of ceremonial centers with celestial events suggests that the Olmecs were using their understanding of astronomy to structure their cities and ritual spaces. These alignments would later become a hallmark of Mesoamerican urban planning, but the initial steps taken by the Olmecs were crucial for the intellectual evolution of Mesoamerican society.
Perhaps one of the most remarkable aspects of Olmec intellectual achievement is their possible use of zero, a concept that would later become fundamental to Mesoamerican mathematics. Though evidence of the full conceptualization of zero in Olmec culture is speculative, some scholars believe that the Olmecs may have had an early mathematical understanding of zero as a placeholder or a symbol for absence in their astronomical and calendrical systems. The later development of zero by the Maya was one of the most significant mathematical breakthroughs in human history, allowing for more precise timekeeping and astronomical calculations. The Olmecs, through their use of early writing systems and numerical concepts for tracking the celestial cycles, may have laid the intellectual foundation for this development. By understanding the need for a symbol to represent the absence of a number in the vast cycles of the cosmos, the Olmecs helped prepare the intellectual landscape for future Mesoamerican mathematicians. The Olmecs' intellectual achievements were not abstract or isolated, they were deeply integrated into their social and political systems. The ritual calendars were tied to the rulers' ability to control the land and ensure the prosperity of their people. These rulers, often seen as divine figures, used astronomical knowledge to legitimize their rule, demonstrating their ability to read the stars and predict events. The rulers' access to early writing systems allowed them to solidify their authority through inscriptions and records, which not only marked their reign, but also ensured that their power was tied to the cosmos.
The Olmec intellectual system also permeated daily life. The ability to predict the agricultural cycles and align religious ceremonies with celestial events reflected a deep integration of knowledge into the very fabric of Olmec society. This connection between intellectual knowledge, political power, and spiritual belief would be a defining characteristic of Mesoamerican civilizations for centuries. The intellectual contributions of the Olmecs were foundational for the intellectual cultures that followed. The Maya, in particular, adopted and refined many of the Olmecs' early ideas, including the use of writing and mathematics, the tracking of astronomical events, and the development of calendar systems. The influence of Olmec intellectual achievements extended beyond the Maya, impacting the Zapotecs and Aztecs, who would later build upon the knowledge laid down by the Olmecs in areas such as timekeeping, writing, and astronomy. The Olmecs were not only pioneers in intellectual pursuits, they were the architects of a knowledge system that would persist throughout Mesoamerica, shaping the region's history and culture for millennia.
The Olmec civilization flourished not only due to its monumental arts and architecture, but also because of its dynamic trade networks, which spanned vast distances across Mesoamerica. These networks were not merely economic in nature, they were integral to the social, political, and cultural fabric of Olmec society. Through the trade of jade, obsidian, rubber, and shells, the Olmec connected distant regions like the Valley of Mexico and Oaxaca, becoming the intermediaries between various Mesoamerican cultures. Their trading prowess would later influence the economic and cultural practices of civilizations such as the Maya and Aztecs. The Olmec economy thrived because of their access to valuable natural resources and their strategic control over trade routes. The tropical lowlands of the Olmec heartland, located in modern-day Veracruz and Tabasco, provided access to abundant resources like rubber, shells, and aquatic goods, while their trade routes stretched as far as the highland regions of Oaxaca and the Valley of Mexico. One of the most significant commodities in the Olmec trade was jade, a material regarded as sacred and deeply symbolic of life, fertility, and power. Sourced primarily from the Motagua River Valley in present-day Guatemala, jade was intricately carved into figurines, ceremonial axes, and jewelry. Jade was not merely decorative, it held immense spiritual value, and its trade was a key component of Olmec interactions with neighboring cultures. The Maya would later adopt jade as a central material for their religious and elite items, continuing the Olmec legacy. Equally valuable was obsidian, a volcanic glass used to make tools and weapons. Obsidian's sharp edges made it an essential resource for both practical daily life and ritual activities. The Olmec's ability to control access to obsidian deposits, such as those in the Puebla Valley in Guatemala, made them a crucial link in the Mesoamerican trade network. This gave the Olmecs economic leverage and political influence, as obsidian was indispensable not only in warfare, but also in religious rituals. The Olmecs also controlled the trade of rubber, derived from the rubber tree found in their lush lowland environment.
Rubber was essential for crafting the balls used in the Mesoamerican ball game, a ritualized sport with deep religious and political significance. Rubber's symbolic and functional use in both games and ceremonies further elevated the Olmec's influence in trade networks. The ability to trade such a unique commodity gave the Olmec civilization a rare and valuable resource that was in high demand throughout Mesoamerica. The trade networks were vital for the cultural exchange between the Olmec and neighboring cultures, particularly in the exchange of art and religious practices. Through trade, the Olmecs introduced their artistic styles and religious symbols, such as the iconic jaguar motif, into neighboring regions. For example, the Zapotecs of Oaxaca and the Maya of the Petén region adopted Olmec iconography and even ritual practices, including the ball game and jaguar symbolism.
The Valley of Mexico, a region that would later become the cradle of the Aztec Empire, showed evidence of Olmec influence in art and urban planning. Colossal heads, similar to those carved by the Olmecs, have been found in Tlatilco, a site near the Valley of Mexico, suggesting early Olmec migration or trade presence. This diffusion of Olmec styles, combined with their role as intermediaries, reinforce the Olmec position as the cultural and economic hub of early Mesoamerica. Furthermore, the Olmec engaged in trade with coastal regions, obtaining exotic marine shells from the Gulf Coast and distributing them across Mesoamerica. These shells were used to craft jewelry and ceremonial items, which became symbols of status and power. The fact that shells from the Gulf of Mexico have been found in Maya and Zapotec sites underscores the broad cultural exchange facilitated by the Olmec. Trade was not just an economic activity for the Olmec, it was a means of reinforcing their political power. By controlling the flow of valuable goods like jade, obsidian, and rubber, the Olmec elites solidified their dominance over surrounding regions. The elite rulers of Olmec centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta used trade as a tool for maintaining their status and authority, as access to these resources was often restricted to the upper echelons of Olmec society. Rulers leveraged their control over trade to strengthen alliances with neighboring cultures, while also using their access to luxury goods to bolster their position as divine intermediaries between the gods and their people. The extensive trade routes allowed the Olmecs to spread their influence, whether through the exchange of ritual objects, the diffusion of artistic styles, or the establishment of political alliances. By the end of the Olmec civilization around 400 BCE, several factors contributed to the collapse of their trade networks. Environmental changes, such as flooding and soil depletion, may have impacted their agricultural production, which was tied to trade. Additionally, shifts in political power and the rise of new cultural centers like the Maya may have led to the decline of Olmec dominance. As the Olmec centers began to wane, their trade routes were absorbed by the emerging Maya and Zapotecs, who continued many of the Olmec's cultural and economic practices. The Maya, in particular, would take Olmec iconography, calendar systems, and religious concepts and refine them, ensuring the lasting legacy of Olmec influence on later Mesoamerican cultures.
The Olmec civilization, considered the first major civilization in Mesoamerica, thrived between 1200 BCE and 400 BCE. Known for their monumental art, monumental architecture, and innovations in writing, astronomy, and trade, the Olmecs were a foundational cultural force. However, by 400 BCE, their once dominant influence began to dissipate, leading to the abandonment of key centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta. The decline of the Olmec civilization is one of the most debated topics in Mesoamerican archaeology, with various theories proposing that environmental, social, and economic factors contributed to the collapse of their once thriving society. San Lorenzo, the first major Olmec center, thrived between 1200 BCE and 900 BCE. The site was a symbol of Olmec power and culture, with its colossal stone heads and elaborate ritual structures demonstrating the sophistication of Olmec political and religious life. However, San Lorenzo's abandonment around 900 BCE marks one of the most significant turning points in Olmec history. Several factors likely contributed to this decline. Environmental stress played a crucial role. Flooding of the nearby rivers, likely caused by changes in the local climate, would have disrupted both the city's agricultural production and the stability of the urban infrastructure. The city's reliance on river systems for trade and transportation meant that any shift in water levels would have had immediate and devastating effects.
Another contributing factor may have been internal political instability. As the elite consolidated power and social hierarchy deepened, tensions between the ruling class and common people may have increased, leading to possible rebellion or resistance. If the elite's control over resources, especially luxury items like jade and obsidian, was threatened, it could have contributed to the city's collapse. Political fragmentation might have occurred, as different factions vied for control, leading to San Lorenzo's eventual abandonment. After San Lorenzo was abandoned, La Venta became the next Olmec center of power, flourishing from 900 BCE to 400 BCE. Located in present-day Tabasco, La Venta became the Olmec's religious and political capital, hosting monumental pyramidal structures and colossal stone heads that underscored its importance. However, by 400 BCE, La Venta also experienced decline. The reasons for its collapse are similarly debated, but a combination of environmental, social, and economic factors likely contributed.
1. Environmental change. Just as San Lorenzo had been affected by environmental degradation, La Venta was likely hit by climate fluctuations that disrupted both agricultural production and resource availability. The region's swampy conditions, which once supported abundant agriculture, could have worsened due to flooding or the silting of nearby rivers. This would have decreased the productivity of the land, making the city increasingly unsustainable. 2. Resource depletion. The Olmecs were known for their control over valuable resources like jade and obsidian, and the depletion of these resources could have weakened the city's economic foundation. As trade networks shifted and access to these essential materials became more difficult, La Venta may have lost its political influence. The loss of trade connections would have destabilized the city's economy and possibly led to its collapse. 3. Social unrest. Like San Lorenzo, La Venta may have faced increasing social unrest. As the elite class monopolized the wealth derived from trade and resources, it's possible that discontent among the common populace grew, leading to tensions that ultimately contributed to the city's downfall. The collapse of the social order and the weakening of the elite's control over religious and political power could have led to internal fragmentation and abandonment.
The decline of the Olmec civilization was not caused by a single factor, but by a combination of interconnected issues. Environmental degradation, including soil depletion, flooding, and changes in agricultural productivity, undermined the core of the Olmec economy. The depletion of resources, such as jade and obsidian, meant that the Olmecs lost the material wealth they once controlled, which in turn weakened their political and religious influence. Social dynamics also played a role. The Olmec elite's control over resources, including trade goods and ritual materials, could have led to increased inequality and social tensions. As the gap between the elites and the common people widened, social unrest may have undermined the political stability of Olmec centers, contributing to their eventual abandonment. Though the Olmec civilization declined by 400 BCE, its legacy endured long after its political collapse. The Maya, Zapotec, and Aztec civilizations
all inherited significant aspects of Olmec culture, including their art, religion, political structure, and trade networks. The colossal heads, the jaguar motifs, and the Olmec's complex calendar system would influence Mesoamerican cultures for centuries. The Olmec may have vanished from the political stage, but their cultural influence continued to shape the development of later Mesoamerican societies. Many of the artistic and spiritual symbols that emerged with the Olmec were later incorporated into the mythologies and rituals of the Maya and Aztecs. Additionally, the Olmec trade routes, though fragmented, were absorbed by emerging cultures, which built upon the Olmec's foundation to foster greater cultural exchange across the region.
The Olmec civilization, recognized as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, may have been short-lived, but its intellectual, religious, and cultural contributions laid the foundation for the growth of later Mesoamerican societies, including the Maya, Zapotec, Aztec, and even Teotihuacan. From the development of writing systems and calendar systems to the influence of artistic motifs and monumental architecture, the Olmecs planted the seeds for cultural advancements that would shape Mesoamerica for centuries. Their influence permeated not only art and architecture, but also political and religious structures, ensuring the persistence of Olmec traditions in the broader Mesoamerican world. The Olmec's early writing systems and their astronomical observations would profoundly influence the way later Mesoamerican societies understood time, recorded history, and interacted with the divine. 1. Early writing systems. Though the Olmec did not develop a fully fledged written language, their pictographic symbols were integral to the early stages of writing in Mesoamerica. These symbols, used on altars and monuments at major Olmec sites like San Lorenzo and La Venta, laid the groundwork for Maya and Zapotec scripts. The Olmec script was primarily used for recording rituals, marking political events, and communicating divine messages, which later became central to Maya civilization's hieroglyphic writing.
The Maya script adopted and expanded Olmec writing principles, evolving into a fully developed system of glyphs that combined both logograms and syllabic symbols. The Maya, however, took it a step further by using the script to record historical events, including royal genealogies and ceremonial occurrences. The transition from the Olmec's symbolic use of writing to the Maya's highly complex system exemplifies the intellectual leap from Olmec foundations to Maya refinements. The calendar systems. The Olmec calendar, based on astronomical observations of the sun and moon, influenced the Maya and Zapotecs, who later advanced these concepts into detailed and accurate calendar systems. The Maya long count calendar, which tracked time over long periods, and the Tzolkin ritual calendar were both heavily inspired by the Olmec's understanding of time cycles and celestial movements. The Olmec calendar itself was likely tied to agricultural practices, marking times for planting and harvesting, while the Maya calendar was refined for both astronomical precision and religious rituals. The Zapotecs in Oaxaca also adapted Olmec timekeeping practices in their own version of a calendar system. By adopting the Olmec's understanding of lunar and solar cycles, the Zapotec civilization laid the groundwork for future advancements in calendar-based rituals and astronomical knowledge. The Olmec civilization was not only a master of monumental art, but also a creator of powerful iconography that influenced generations of Mesoamerican cultures. Symbols like the jaguar and the feathered serpent carried profound religious significance and were incorporated into the rituals and art of later civilizations.
Jaguar symbolism. The jaguar, central to Olmec art and religion, was associated with strength, power, and the ability to transcend earthly realms. The Olmec often depicted jaguars in ceremonial masks and sculptures, associating them with divine rulers and shamanic power. This jaguar motif was adopted by the Maya, where the jaguar was seen as a symbol of the underworld
and was linked to the god of night. The Aztecs, too, revered the jaguar, with their elite warriors taking on the identity of jaguars, becoming part of an exclusive military order. This motif, passed through Olmec hands, came to symbolize spiritual transformation and the power of the elite across various cultures, continuing to hold religious and political meaning throughout Mesoamerican history. 2. Feathered serpent. The feathered serpent, a figure that would later become synonymous with the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl and the Maya god Kukulkan, is another example of Olmec influence. In Olmec iconography, serpents symbolized the underworld and the mystical connection between earth and heaven. The feathered serpent motif encapsulated the union of earth and sky, symbolizing both the regeneration of life and the power of transformation. The Maya adopted this imagery, associating the feathered serpent with the sky gods and rain, both central to their agricultural systems. Similarly, the Aztecs held Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, as a vital figure in their pantheon, linking him to creation, wisdom, and fertility. Through trade, religious iconography like this became a key symbol of divine authority and governance.
The Olmecs pioneered many of the architectural techniques and urban planning principles that would define later Mesoamerican cities. Their monumental architecture, which included pyramidal structures and large ceremonial platforms, set the stage for the Teotihuacan and Monte Alban civilizations, where similar architectural layouts were employed. Teotihuacan, one of the largest cities in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, reflected many architectural influences drawn from the Olmec. The Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon at Teotihuacan, like Olmec pyramids, were aligned with celestial movements and used as centers of ritual activity. The city's urban planning, including its grid-like layout, echoed Olmec principles of creating spaces for religion and political authority. The Olmec influence can also be seen in the use of large-scale sculptures and mosaics, techniques that were refined and expanded upon at Teotihuacan. Monte Alban, the Zapotec city, also drew inspiration from Olmec urban planning, particularly in the construction of platforms, pyramids, and ball courts. The Olmecs had pioneered the use of ceremonial spaces integrated with urban centers, a principle that the Zapotecs would adopt at Monte Alban, where rulers used large ceremonial plazas to consolidate their political power.
Though the Olmec civilization collapsed by around 400 BCE, their legacy was absorbed and transformed by subsequent Mesoamerican cultures. The Maya, Zapotecs, Aztecs, and Teotihuacan all inherited Olmec artistic styles, rituals, and political structures, preserving and adapting them for their own purposes. The Olmec influence on later civilizations was profound, shaping everything from religious iconography to city planning, and their contributions to writing and astronomy would endure for millennia. The Olmecs may have vanished as a political force, but their cultural and intellectual foundations were passed down through the ages, securing their place as one of the most influential civilizations in Mesoamerica. The Olmec civilization, while disappearing as a dominant political power around 400 BCE, left an indelible mark on the cultural, religious, and political landscape of Mesoamerica. As the mother culture of the region, the Olmecs were not just pioneers in art and architecture, they were the architects of ideas and practices that would shape the Maya, Zapotec, Aztec, and Teotihuacan civilizations. Through cultural diffusion, trade, and religious influence, the Olmec legacy continued long after their major centers were abandoned, contributing to the development of Mesoamerican identity for millennia. Though the Olmec civilization declined politically, their cultural impact persisted through cultural diffusion across Mesoamerica. The Olmec were at the forefront of connecting different regions through trade and interaction.
As a result,
Olmec symbols, religious practices, and artistic styles found their way into the material and spiritual culture of later Mesoamerican civilizations. 1. Writing and calendar systems. The Olmec's early writing systems and calendar systems laid the foundation for the Maya and Zapotec civilizations. While the Olmecs did not develop a full-fledged writing system, their pictographic symbols on monuments served as precursors to the Maya Guthic script. These early symbols were adopted and expanded upon by the Maya, who developed one of the most sophisticated writing systems of the ancient world. Similarly, the Olmec's astronomical knowledge of the solar and lunar cycles provided the basis for the Maya and Zapotec calendar systems, helping future civilizations track time for both agricultural and ritual purposes. 2. Iconography. Spiritual symbols endure across time. Olmec iconography, particularly the jaguar and feathered serpent motifs, became powerful symbols that transcended the Olmec civilization. These motifs were central to Olmec religion, and, through cultural exchange, they were adopted by later civilizations. Jaguar symbolism. The Olmec jaguar symbolized strength, power, and spiritual transformation. Jaguars were associated with the underworld and the ability to navigate between the realms of the living and the divine. This iconography was integrated into the art of the Maya and Aztecs, where the jaguar came to symbolize royal power and military might. The Maya, for example, used the jaguar to represent the night sky and shamanic transformation, while the Aztec jaguar warriors embodied both elite status and divine connection. Feathered serpent. The feathered serpent, which first appeared in Olmec religious art, became one of the most influential symbols in Mesoamerica. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, became a central figure in Aztec religion, associated with wisdom, fertility, and the wind. The Maya similarly adopted the serpent figure, associating it with Kukulkan, their feathered serpent god of rain and storms. The feathered serpent's enduring significance throughout Mesoamerican cultures traces its roots directly to the Olmec's religious iconography. The Olmec monumental architecture, including pyramidal structures, plazas, and ball courts, set the stage for the architectural achievements of later Mesoamerican civilizations. The Olmec's focus on ceremonial centers and urban planning influenced the architectural developments of Teotihuacan, Monte Alban, and other Mesoamerican cities. 1. Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan, one of Mesoamerica's largest and most influential cities, drew significant architectural inspiration from the Olmecs. The city's pyramids of the sun and moon are structurally similar to Olmec pyramids, built to align with astronomical events. Teotihuacan's grid-like urban layout reflects Olmec principles of creating ritual spaces and public plazas. The Olmec influence is evident in the way Teotihuacan organized its ceremonial areas to align with celestial movements and political power, creating an urban environment that fused spirituality with social order. 2. Monte Alban. The Zapotecs at Monte Alban also inherited Olmec architectural elements. The Zapotec pyramids, platforms, and ball courts mimic Olmec designs, reflecting a shared understanding of how ceremonial architecture could assert both political power and divine authority. Like the Olmec, the Zapotecs incorporated urban planning with ritual significance, organizing their city around central ceremonial spaces that connected earthly rule with divine favor. The Olmec colossal heads are perhaps the most iconic and enduring legacy of their civilization. Carved from basalt, each head represents an Olmec ruler or divine figure, and they continue to captivate modern audiences as symbols of Olmec political power and spiritual authority. These colossal heads, though physically massive, carry symbolic weight as representations of the divine right to rule, a theme that was later adopted by the Maya and Aztecs. Sacred art. Olmec sacred art, such as jaguar figurines, feathered serpent motifs, and ritual masks was used in religious rituals to connect with the divine. These art forms were passed down to later civilizations, becoming central elements of their own religious practices. The Maya used Olmec-inspired art in their royal burials and ceremonial objects, while the Aztecs incorporated Olmec symbolism into their own temples and rituals, ensuring the survival of Olmec-style iconography for centuries. The Olmec's cultural achievements, far from fading with their political collapse, lived on through cultural diffusion, symbolic transmission, and the spread of Olmec-influenced practices across Mesoamerica. Their influence permeated multiple facets of life: art, architecture, religion, and political structure, shaping the trajectory of Mesoamerican civilization for millennia. The Olmec may have disappeared as a political power, but their spiritual symbols, artistic innovations, and architectural feats continue to inspire and inform Mesoamerican identity to this day.
If you enjoyed learning about the Olmec civilization and their lasting impact on Mesoamerica, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the ancient cultures that shaped our world. Have thoughts or questions? Drop them in the comments below. We'd love to hear where you're watching from and which part of the Olmec legacy fascinated you the most. Stay tuned for more fascinating stories from the past, and remember, history never sleeps. It's always waiting to be uncovered.